Welcome, everyone. Welcome. I see maybe a couple of new names I've been trying to scan here and there, maybe some that were with us earlier that weren't in others. But look, we've really had a good time today. I was actually talking to the team, and I've gotten so much out of today because of all the different perspectives. So, as being the business development manager, my name's Clay Bowman. We get to present the product quite a bit, but getting this today has been very beneficial for my team. I hope it's been beneficial for you. We've had a good time doing it. This is we're almost in the end zone, so we're going to hand this over to Eric Wilhite. He's our product lead here at Tech Insight on the Fastway product. Many of you know Eric. We work hand in hand here at Fastway. We're a very vertical company. We got a vertical product, we have a vertical team, and we bring their expertise to the table, and they're extremely helpful and knowledgeable. And Eric knows probably more than anyone. He's been with us the longest, and he's an absolute pleasure to work with. And he's a family man, and he's just a great human being. So I'm going to hand it over to Eric, and he's going to bring us home today. Thanks, Eric.
I feel like that's a lot of pressure to live up to. I think I'd rather be introduced as just a simple guy presenting reporting. But like Clay said, I'm Eric. I'm product lead for Fastway. Um, I see a lot of names on this list that I recognize. I see some names on this list that actually went through an all-day training with me a couple of days ago. So appreciate everybody being here. Um, Lately, I've been focused on bringing easier data access and custom reporting options to Fastway. And that's what we'll be focusing on today. So I'll be kind of pulling back the curtain on some exciting new building blocks that hopefully can help you make better use of your Fastway data. Now, one note before we actually dive in here, this talk's going to be very high level. So we're going to be up in the clouds today. We're not going to be getting too far down into the weeds. So this same material was just taught for reference at our in-person user summit as an all-day training, and feel like we just scratched the surface in that all-day training. So can't get too far into the details today, but the goal is for those of you who weren't at the training last week to leave here understanding what's possible. So please try to avoid the kind of pending overwhelm that can come whenever I'm tossing new terms and new technologies and a bunch of new things at you. Um, try to avoid that if you can, and let's make the goal just kind of understanding what's possible as far as getting the data out of Fastway goes. After you leave here today. So with that said, let's hop in here and dive into the presentation. So let's start by addressing a fairly common hangup when discussing hosted software as a service versus kind of the traditional on-premise, local database option that most people are used to in this industry. Um, with Fastway, you don't have to manage the infrastructure. You don't have to manage the database, but we still give you full access to that underlying data. Now, there's a myriad of ways that we do that already. So some folks have a subscription to direct database access even. But even if you don't want to take it to that level, we're trying to make it as easy as possible to get your data out of Fastway and make it useful. So we do that kind of by providing tools that you can use as building blocks. Now, one of those tools that we're going to talk about today is GraphQL, and we're going to focus on GraphQL and all of the things that GraphQL itself kind of provides as really a foundational layer to build on top of. Now, if you've never heard this term, GraphQL, really it's a fancy way of saying uh, that the data itself is graphed behind the scenes, and the QL is query language. So that it's literally saying, okay, you've got full data access through a query language to a graph of Fastway data. So in layman's terms, Kind of taking it even a step higher, that just means everything, all the messy bits like the database and the application knowledge, it's kind of abstracted away into a graph that you can explore. Now, we'll look at that in a little more detail in a bit, so I don't want to get too lost in terminology. Um, the textbook definition, which I joked in the in-person meeting, I think this is required for just about any presentation that I do, is to uh, kind of explore the textbook. You know, really, this is just a data query language on top of an API. So when you hear query language, many of you probably hear SQL. And when you hear API, most of you probably have at least some knowledge or have at least heard the term REST API. I know Clay loves to throw it out, so many of you have at least heard those two terms. And really, if you mash the two together, what you get is this GraphQL API that we're talking about as a foundational data access layer. So looking at these in a little more detail. So if you're familiar with SQL, and I know that many of the folks I see in the attendees list here, I know that many of you are. But even if you're not, SQL as a query language is pretty familiar just by reading it. So you can kind of tell, okay, I'm selecting out some number of fields from some table. Now, there's maybe not so obvious downsides to direct SQL access. So one of them being it requires pretty intimate knowledge of the data structures. So if you don't know what tables or how those tables join together exist in the data structure, you're really at a disadvantage. Because then before you even start exploring the data and writing reports for that data, really you've got to kind of go to school on what all is even there to begin with. And then you got to figure out how to connect it all together. So in this kind of super simple contrived example, selecting out a ticket number, selecting out a net weight, things can seem uh, simple at first, but the complexity grows quite quickly. Now you can kind of put that up against a REST API, which couldn't be more simple. So with a REST API, you've got basically just an endpoint. So no different than if you were to go to HTTPS google.com and google.com returns a web page. If you were to go to this endpoint with the proper credentials, with a proper API key, it would return tickets. Now, the downside to that, yes, it's super easy to hit. It's super easy to get access to the data through that REST API. The downside is it's very not flexible. The data is accessible, but you can't change what data you're getting back. The response is going to come back with some list of tickets, but what if you need a PO number that's attached to that ticket and it's not there? Well, you're out of luck with the REST API unless you go issue more queries to other endpoints. So again, it's kind of simple to start, but then the complexity builds as you need to traverse other fields. So the core of what we're going to talk about today, and like I said, the foundational layer of this data access platform that we're building is GraphQL. So you can kind of see here when you compare this to both SQL and a REST API, really it's both of them at the same time. So you're issuing a query to a URL to an endpoint, um, and it's always going to be the same endpoint. So you've got the same ease of access of a REST API. But then you'll see below it, you've also got a query that you're issuing along with that URL. So in this case, we're issuing a query for get tickets. We're pulling a couple fields out alongside that. That query could be anything that we want. So if we wanted to add a PO to it, all we would need to do is add the PO as one of the requested fields in the ticket, or anything else that we would want to kind of explore there. So you get the flexibility of SQL, but the ease of use of a REST API. Now, one thing that this kind of hides and is actually a really powerful feature of GraphQL, which we'll see in a minute, is that you don't really need a knowledge of the underlying database. So as you kind of type and as you explore the graph, um, the options kind of open up for you. So if you just have a vague idea of, okay, a ticket has an order associated with it, you don't have to go digging to see what that order table is, how they connect, what keys to join on. All you need to know is, okay, I want fields from that order, and you can expand out into it. So we'll look at that in a minute as well. Um, and again, at its simplest, GraphQL itself is just about asking for fields to be returned. So you've got an object called load ticket in this case, and then fields on that load ticket to be returned. Now, not going to get into the weeds here, but did want to show you some of the power that comes along with this. So again, if you're familiar with SQL, what you see on the screen, it certainly looks different than SQL, but the way it's phrased probably looks very familiar. So you can do some pretty powerful modifying of any given query. So you can do a limit, an order by, a where clause, really anything that you could do in a SQL query, you can do against this data. Now remember, this is a hosted platform. So one of the things you don't have to worry about here is, really where this data lives, the security behind it, all of that is abstracted away from you. So the messy bits of SQL and that kind of direct database access are kind of lifted off of your shoulders, and you can just worry about writing a query for a report or writing a query for an Excel document or wherever it's going to be used. There's some, common where filters. Again, not going to go into it. This PowerPoint will be available, and there's even better documentation than this PowerPoint available already that I'll point you to. But this slide in particular is one to pay attention to. So, up until this point, looking at any given query, that would be a static query. So if you were to, let's just look back at this, if we were to run this over and over again in a report, you can see up until now, that date, so that ticket date 2022-0101, that's not going to change. So if you were going to build that into a report, not really a great idea because that report's never going to change. But GraphQL allows you to embed dynamic parameters. And so this is important. So this is what can be used if we're talking about passing data in from Excel or passing data into these queries from Telerik, which is our embedded reporting engine. You can use these parameters to make the query dynamic and runnable for a date range, for example, or for a certain subset of customers. So there's a bunch of different variable types. Again, not going to get into it here. There's better documentation available. So what I do want to get to is actually this graph. So I'm going to go here and let's pop open the graph. And at first, this is probably going to look super intimidating. There are loads of lines and loads of tables everywhere that you look. So this is all the data that's currently exposed through what we call the graph or the data graph, but through the GraphQL query language. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to the root just to kind of give you an idea of what's here. And you can see here's all of the fields that you're able to explore. So there's that load ticket that we saw. I can actually click on load ticket, and it's going to take me to this load ticket table. So I can see, okay, here's my load ticket, and here's everything associated with it. If I kind of keep going down, I can see, okay, a load ticket has an order, and I can traverse it through there. So again, this is kind of just kind of a helper to let you know, okay, there's lots of things available. There's lots of connections available to explore. And this is really what behind the scenes is powering these custom reporting options that we're about to look at. So let me hop back to my PowerPoint. And So let's actually look at this live and in action now. So it, let's look at a couple of samples of where we would use this and where you could use this really in the as soon as you're off of here and get running with the documentation. So let's pop out of there for good. And I'm going to pull up first, just so that way you can kind of see where these queries are being written and where they're coming from. So there's a tool behind the scenes that you can use to make actually authoring these queries a little easier. There's, again, documentation for it, but I want you to at least see that that query is coming from there behind the scenes. And then first, let's dive into Excel. So many of us use Excel. I mean, I've seen feature requests coming across our desk quite often for fields being added to the ticket query, so that way data can be exported to Excel, or maybe custom reports being authored just so that way you can get the data into Excel to manipulate it further. With exposing the data through this GraphQL data access layer, we've actually got a way to author your own queries and author your own Excel reports directly within Excel using GraphQL. So the first thing I'll point out is there's a new add-in called Fastway for Excel, the add-in store, and this is publicly available now. So any of you could go grab it. It's available for the desktop version of Excel, the web version of Excel. It's any of the uh, later Excel versions, I think 2016 and up. So you could add that Fastway for Excel, and go ahead and let's add that in there. And you'll see once you do that, on your Home tab now, there's a Fastway query pane. So I'm going to pop that open. And you'll see this gives you a fair number of options here. I've actually got a saved query just to kind of save some time. And really, you're just filling out some parameters. So all of these things are coming from your Fastway web portal. So you've got your API URL that's coming from the your web portal. You've got an API key. Now in this case, this API key has already been disabled, so you can try to copy it and use it, but it won't work. You can use your own API key in here, and it will work against your data and your data alone. And then you've got a GraphQL query. So, any query that you've written, again, not going to get into actually writing it because there's no time today. You could uh, take that query, dump it into here, save it, so that way it's a rerunnable query. Those queries could be shared, across users, across, if you want to save it, kind of embed it in kind of a shared SharePoint document. You can do some things to reuse that same query. And then I'm just going to click run. So what that's doing behind the scenes is just calling out to the GraphQL API, and it's saying, hey, give me the data that's in this query. So very similar to if you were to, pop in and try to extract data from a local SQL server, for example. So it's dumping all of those into a table here that from there, really, it's up to you what to do with. Now all of your data is there. It's accessible directly within the sheet. I kind of built a simple pivot table here just as a production report. So, who are my customers that are running, what jobs are they running, and what products are they buying? Just a simple kind of uh, customer summary that is grouping up what the amounts are, what the total nets are. Your imagination is really the limit once you get the data into Excel. So again, that's published today, accessible today. If you've got Excel, you could pop in, grab the add-in tool, and be off to the races as far as writing these custom Excel reports. So that's the easier option for actually extracting your data. So all you need to know there is GraphQL. Once you understand the basics of GraphQL, you could dump your data into Excel and build it in a place where you're comfortable building it. Now, not necessarily a downside, but one thing that you miss in this is, an Excel sheet, yes, it can be shared internally, but an Excel sheet is not going to be embedded within the Fastway portal. So instead, if we want to build it into the Fastway portal, what we would do is pop out of all these tabs. It's a hazard of trying to show lots of things at once. I've got to find what I'm looking for here. So we use a tool called Telerik that actually builds the internal report. So this reporting engine here is the exact same engine that all of us use to build all of the existing reports. So when you write in a report request and Ron or Haley or Ariel or whomever fields that and authors it for you, this is what we're writing it in. So now this is available and exposed directly to you to make edits and changes and updates and even author wholly new reports. So the data that is powering this is still coming from GraphQL. So again, without getting too far into the details, I can pop open here and you can see, okay, there's a web service data source. There's documentation as to what all this means. And you can see, okay, here's a query. Now it's formatted kind of ugly and there's some other things going on, but uh, really all you need to be aware of is that there's a GraphQL query in here. And that GraphQL query is what powers this particular report. So you can see the fields that up at the top right here. It's probably kind of small on the screen share, but you can see some of the fields that are at play. So the ticket number, the net weight, the order fields. If I expand out into it, all of the things that I asked for in the query are then there for me to drag onto the report. Once I've done that, I'll just hit preview just that way I can kind of see it here locally and look at the data that's returned. Once I've done that, then I've got a report that is, obviously runnable locally, but not yet deployed. So none of my Fastway users could see this. If you are a Fastway admin, what you can do is actually, let me close out of this. And I'm going to pull up my web portal. And so you'll see I'm logged in to kind of a test company here. And when I go to my reports, and let's just look at all of the reports that are available, nothing new here. All of you are very used to seeing all the categories, all the standard reports. I'm going to go up to the top right to this icon, and you've probably not seen this icon before, but if you have GraphQL enabled on your account and you're an admin, you should see this icon now. So what that brings you to is a simple little management page. So this is where I can manage and upload any custom reports that I'm writing behind the scenes. So I've got that report that that I was just looking at. So the custom ticket detail report. So let's just pop in here and upload that. So I'm going to look at my desktop, and it is this one, custom ticket detail. Upload that, and you'll see it loads it in here. Now, an important distinction to make if you're going down the route of writing these custom reports is this category. So I kind of skipped over that, but you want to be careful that you're only loading a typical report into this internal category. You can author reports that are exposed to a customer role or to a hauler role, meaning that your customers would have access to a customer report that you've written, or your haulers would have access to a custom report that you've written. There's special considerations to take into account when you are talking about those roles. You want to make sure that there's some parameters included to filter that data. So that's one thing that I want to point out here, and it's pointed out in big and bold letters in all of the documentation, just to be sure you don't accidentally expose anything that you should. So we've got that loaded up. It's called this custom ticket detail report. So now I'm going to navigate back and let's just look at my reporting page again. And if I go down into my category list, I'll see a new category called user created. So anything that I create custom as a Fastway user is going to go into that user created category. I'll click on that. I'll see my reports, and you'll see I've got a couple of sample reports already loaded in there as well. But in this case, I just want to load up that custom ticket detail that I was running before, and you'll see, voila. So I went from GraphQL query to custom Telerik report to embedded and runnable report. Um, so you can kind of see the building blocks are there to really enable you to make any customizations that are needed to any of the standard reports or built-in reports, along with the building blocks to get your data out of Fastway completely through something like Excel or through something like Power BI, etc. So with that, I'm going to look at, get back out of here. So that all probably sounds good, and your head's probably spinning because I went very quickly through some pretty nuanced and complicated topics. So what I wanted to do with my last couple minutes here before I kind of open up for any questions is look and point you in the right direction of how to get started with any of this. So let's hop to the knowledge base. Now, most of you probably familiar, have been here before for some reason or another. Maybe our support staff has directed you to, some best practice article here. If you haven't, then just help.tacinsight.com is where you go. And on here, in addition to all of the web portal articles, all of the desktop scale articles, all the things that you're used to seeing and interacting with, we've got this new section that we're building out for GraphQL and our APIs, along with all of the data access surrounding those APIs. So I'm going to pop into the overview, and the first place, and you don't have to remember these, I'll provide a link and a follow-up to make sure that you're pointed in the right direction. But if you want to get started with GraphQL and Telerik to do some embedded reporting, the best place to start is this quick start. So it's going to give you all of the links, all of the tools, all of kind of the further links to further documentation to get going. So, first things first, you got to download all the tools, and then from there, you can see in this last link here. So this is going to direct you to the specifics. Now I would start with GraphQL first and learn kind of the query engine behind everything, because once you learn GraphQL, you can start to layer on whatever reporting, um, uh, really the end user experience that you want. So then if you want to plug in embedded Telerik reports, you can do so. If you want to start with kind of on the simpler side, on the Excel side, where you're just using a query and then you can build reports inside of Excel based upon that data, then you don't necessarily have to worry about Telerik at all. You could just jump to the GraphQL docs and maybe start with this crash course. So, get all the tools downloaded, go through the crash course, ask us as many questions as you need. Our support staff are knowledgeable about this as well, so they can help you out if you do start to stumble. And roll through these docs, and there's a lot here to hold your hand as you start to learn this custom reporting experience. So again, not not expecting or not even hoping that you'll leave here being able to write a GraphQL query or a custom report immediately, but am hoping that you can take this and kind of start to explore and ask questions about it. The goal here is to build a data access platform that is useful to you, the Fastway user, and your end users. So the other folks within your company. So with that, I think I'm gonna take a breath and open up for questions. Any of the other Fastway folks, I haven't been monitoring, so not sure if there are questions, or I'm not sure if I even took a long enough breath to allow for questions
I don't
in
see any
that.
yet. I'm keeping an eye on it. No questions yet. Again, to ask a question, there's a couple of chat bubbles up at the top of your Teams window that have a little question mark inside of those chat bubbles. Just click on those and you should be able to submit a question if you have one.
One thing I'm going to do now is go ahead. I'm obviously going to follow this up with um, far better instructions, but I'm going to pop a link in there just to that quick start. So that way someone could kind of take this and at least start to poke around with getting their data out of Fastway. And the goal here is not necessarily to immediately jump into the deep end. Like I said, I would probably start with GraphQL. And we'll have some more follow-ups specifically on GraphQL, because we understand that that's kind of the initial hurdle to this conversation is learning that new query language and learning how to kind of explore that graph in particular. So this is the, like I said, the high level overview. I think we probably need to follow up with, and many of you I know agreed in the in-person meeting, some more in-depth or focused sessions specifically on each topic.
So there you got your first question there, Eric, under in review, under the Q&A. And to see that link that Eric just pasted into the chat, you'll want to click the regular chat bubble. It's also up the top up there next to show participants. You should see a little button. If you hover over it, it says show conversation. That's where he put that link.
All right, let's see. All right, so we've got a question, and it's fairly specific, but I know the background of it, so I'm gonna try to make it a little more relatable to everyone here. So Jim's asking, would this feature, or would, I guess, GraphQL in particular, give them as a Fastway user or their customers better access to their dispatch request fulfillment? And the answer there is absolutely yes. So you, as an internal Fastway user, could build on top of that to be able to monitor really in real time outside of Fastway. So in a live updating Excel doc, or a report that's scheduled to go out to any of your internal staff, or really any way that you want to monitor request fulfillment using GraphQL, and your customers as well. So if you wanted to build a report or an Excel document that you could hand off to a customer, maybe they don't want a Fastway login, but they would love, some updating Excel doc, or Telerik report, or really anything that can access that GraphQL data. You can scope the data that's returned all the way down to a customer or a specific hauler, so that way they can only see their requests, only see their fulfillment, but see it, live and updating in real time. Now, obviously, the specifics of that are a little messier than the easy answer, but it absolutely enables that, both for internal access and customer and hauler access. That also, so I don't see any more questions in there, but I will kind of close with this, because it Jim's question kind of leads me to why would you use this when you could potentially have direct SQL access? And the biggest reason is I guess the biggest reason outside of the pre-built graph. So the data that you can explore and explore without needing to do the messy joins is the authentication and the authorization that this enables. So you can do things kind of like Jim's alluding to here, where you can scope a query or you can scope an API key all the way down to a specific customer if you wanted. So that way a single customer could see that single customer's order fulfillment. So it's not necessarily just the graph in and of itself that is a big feature gain here. You also get a lot more granular access control along with it. Okay, Gene, I haven't been paying attention. I don't think there more questions.
We do have one more from Dahlia there under in review.
Oh, nice. All right, so Dahlia is asking, will we have the option to use an existing report as kind of a base or a jumping off point? Absolutely, yes. So that's something that me and my team are working on right now, and it was one of the biggest points of feedback coming out of the in-person training, is kind of converting over a subset of reports to allow you to jump off from. And honestly, internally, so when Haley or Ron or Ariel or myself or whoever internally are writing reports, we never start from scratch. We always start from an existing query. We always start from an existing report. Um, so there will absolutely be some jumping off points that are published. There may actually already be in the documentation. I know there's at least two, because we built two for the in-person training. But the plan is to give a pretty, I guess, uh, good a good roadmap to where you could jump into something that's close enough to what you're after and just make some modifications from there. Okay, Jim, Dahlia, thanks for the questions. Gene, I don't think we've got any more, do we?
We do not. It looks like we're good to go. All right. Well, if we don't have any other questions from our audience, I want to thank you all very much again for attending our virtual conference. And hopefully, some year very soon, we'll be able to do the entire conference as one big thing in person here in our hometown of Knoxville. But I'm glad that we could do something in its place, since COVID-19 kind of messed things up for everybody involved. But thank you to everyone who came out for the small in-person meeting that we had last week. And thank you again to everyone who attended this today. If you have any follow-up questions at all, you can definitely get in touch with our support team. You can reach them at support@tacinsight.com. We've got that support email all over our website. We've also got our phone number on there. We're pretty easy to get in touch with. And one more time, I really appreciate y'all coming out. Eric, did you have anything else you want to say before we sign off?
Nope. Really
All
appreciate
right.
everybody being here.
Great. Excellent. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and end the meeting for everybody. We hope you have a great rest of your Tuesday afternoon.